invitation.
Oh, thank you so much, guys, for having me alone down there. And thanks for being here. But I want to talk about, so first I can say this is joint work with Sam Byron and Christian Magallani. And you will see that this was supposed to be a talk in between philosophical logic and philosophy of science. Now, unfortunately, the people that knows the physics of this thing are not here, so you got stuck with me, which did mostly the logical part. Now, I don't know who among you was familiar with the topic, so location is becoming a hot topic in philosophical logic and metaphysics. I think it's important. First of all, we use location, just as an introduction. We use location it's absolutely central in our everyday life. We always say something like this, for example. This is the example I'm going to go always with. My copy of Endgame is on the table. Table is in the room. Therefore, my copy of Endgame is in the room. The first performance of Endgame was at the Royal Theatre in London in 1957. Therefore, the Royal Theatre was in London in 1957, and so on and so forth. We use location metaphorically, we're in love, we're in the dark, our minds are somewhere else, and so on and so forth. But we always will use it also in philosophy. I mean, metaphysics is replete with issues about location, for example, persistence, determinism, extended simples and unextended complexes, determinables, determinants, the identity of indiscernibles. Lots of philosophy of physics. We'll see a little bit here, but I will tell you about something about, for example, something about non-relativistic quantum mechanics with functional realism, but also philosophy of social science. There's huge discussions apparently on the location of social entities, like where is the University of Lisbon located? It's just where the buildings are located. If you go to give a talk somewhere else, given that you are somehow a member of the department of University of Lisbon, the University of Lisbon suddenly actually is in Oslo now, just because you're there. So on and so forth. And there's a bunch of things in philosophy of mind, which are so the relation of pain, for example, which is a huge topic. And lately, I've been doing a little bit of work on analytic philosophy of religion, because, for example, there is no logical omnipresence. So there's a lot of logics of being in two different places at the same time, but not being in all the places. And of course, some objects might be in all the places. The first one you might think of. This is just to give you an idea, because if you are not into location, you might think, oh my God, these guys are going to talk about a very restricted topic that only 4 people are interested in. It's true that we're only 5 people interested in, but I think it has real potential. The other motivation is that I tend to think that whenever, no, what's happened? I don't know, this is not working anymore. Right, let's try this. Let's try. No. Let's do this. No, this is not working. Oh, this is not working. Okay, now it's working. That's it. So I tend to think that, okay, see, it's working. I tend to think that everything that other men took seriously, we should take seriously. And so this is one of the last quotes before he got completely mad. So this is bread and wine, and it's actually very crucial in the point that he understands where these things are. Because the point is, let's say, it talks about the sunset of the old gods and the rise of the new god. So it's really important, for example, that he understands where the Greek text was. And I tend to think, once again, if Hölderlin took it seriously, we should take it seriously as well. And I didn't want to disappoint Jacopo and Bruno that know me by now. I'm obsessed with literature. They were expecting me for quotes. So I didn't want to disappoint. There will be others. Okay, but now let's do a little bit of philosophy here. So I'm not going to go through the outline because it's fairly straightforward, and I'm not going to talk about more substantive issues. So let me jump right in. So in several approaches to quantum gravity, this is the kind of a research program that wants somehow to marry general relativity and quantum mechanics. Space-time is emergent. There is no spatial-temporal structure in the. This is particularly true, apparently, for some. For example, causal set theories and loop quantum gravity. There is currently a debate whether string theory has the same thing related to dualities, because you have this mapping between space-times that are topologically completely different. But it is, let's say, the orthodoxy that at least for some program, you will not have space-time infinity. Now, the spatial temporal reality and the spatial temporal degrees of freedom and space-time itself had to emerge in a certain way. And this is crucial in this literature because it promises to undermine the so-called threat of empirical incoherence. Which roughly is the threat that if the theory is empirically coherent, it actually undermines the reasons that you have to believe it in the first place. And the thought here is that, of course, our confirmations are in space-time. If you don't have space-time, then what reason do you have to believe the theory in the first place? Now, how to understand emergence? It's a complicated matter. And of course, there's a ton of literature about that. And there's an influential argument, it's called the argument from intimacy, that tells us how not to understand. You shouldn't understand it methodologically. Okay, you shouldn't say that whatever are the more fundamental degrees of freedom or the more fundamental structure, they are not spatiotemporal, they're not part. Okay. And the argument exploits a connection between location and part. In particular, the following connection, that holes inherit their locations from their parts. We will see it. What do I mean by that? And the thought is that this is exactly what fails in the case of space-time emergence. And this is important because it tells us that we cannot look at other cases of emergence that we had already, in which mereology is necessary, if not sufficient, it's necessary, and then apply the same thing to space-time, because it fails exactly because of that. We're going to evaluate that, these arguments. Now, I tend to think that this is important for different reasons. First, it offers a new metaphysical options for understanding space-time emergence. In the end, we will see that if you wanted to actually stick to mereological emergence, you could. I don't suggest that you do, but if you wanted, and there are people that do want in the literature, you could. You need to do a few moves that I'll detail to you. It sheds new light on the relationship between space-time emergence and prominent views in metaphysics of objects or metaphysics of matter more generally. For example, we will see a family of views which is called supersubstantivalism, which has actually sparked a renewed interest even in philosophy of physics, especially in field theory and generativity in particular. And they bear on a debate within the literature on formal theories of location, as Jacopo suggested. I'm writing a book on that. So that's how actually my interest got started. Now, here, so I'm going to be, I think that you're familiar with issues here, but probably you're not familiar with issues here because formal theories of location were really afford to do that. Like, so here's what I mean by that. So there is a debate about where space-time regions are. Okay, so Bruno is at that space-time region. Well, where is the space-time region that Bruno is located at? And now the orthodoxy has that there are two options here. Either they're located themselves or they're not located anywhere. And the choice between those is just a matter of stipulation. It's of no metaphysical importance. Now, I think that this paper challenges this orthodoxy. And as a matter of fact, I think that the stuff Jacopo is working on challenges that orthodoxy as well. Okay, and it's a shame because this is one of my favorite people in the entire world, and this, unfortunately, is the religious path which I love previous year. So it tells you also about that. Okay, so let's see the argument then. Okay, the argument, as I said, like exploits the supposed intimate relation between partner and location, which was first vaguely suggested by Ted Simon in this very influential paper, which is called partner. The thought is that if X is part of Y is located wherever X is located, which seems pretty natural. Okay, so here is the argument by Sam Byron. Okay, now I didn't put the quotation to read it. The thought is that I'm going to put it to show you that I didn't cheat, and given that, and Byron is one of the co-authors, so he read it. So the the reconstruction I'm about to present, it was checked by the author himself. So this is the original process. So it can be actually reconstructed as the classic argument in which you have three propositions, which are pretty natural, but they're jointly inconsistent. So the first one is just the formulation of space-time mereological emergence. For any space-time region R has no spatiotemporal parts. I'm going to take the finite case because it's easy. The second is the thought that we will see that regions are somewhere. Why? They are in space-time in this, right? Bruno is located here, where it's located, it's clearly in space. So for any region R, no spatiotemporal parts, R is located somewhere. And then the inheritance of location, this is just, again, side thought that, just apply to in the case of N, if R is located somewhere, well, it inherits the location from its parts. Okay, good. So here's the argument. Of course, you already see that, right? I mean, it's really, really obvious that there is at least a tension there. It's not an outright contradiction yet because the terms are too vague at this stage of the argument, but you can see the tension, and that's fine for the beginning. So given methodological emergence, right, every space-time region has no spatiotemporal parts, but the inheritance, right, that region will be located where their parts are, but given that their parts are not located anywhere, that region will not be located anywhere. But of course, this is in tension when regions are somewhere. You get that regions are both somewhere and anywhere before you get a contradiction. Okay, so that's the argument in a nutshell. Now, you might think that at this stage, like, you can just resist the argument by pointing out that inheritance of location is far too vague. Of course, there is a sense in which I am where my hand is, but clearly there's also another sense in which I'm not, right? So I'm also, because I'm where my hand is, like, so I'm here, but of course I'm also where the other hand of mine is, right? But this hand is clearly not where this hand is. So, I mean, it's an intuitive thought, but it's far too vague to be remotely plausible. Now, if you do a little bit of formal theories, you will see that there are different inequivalent ways to cash out rigorously that principle. I'm not going to go over it in the book. We do, of course. This, by the way, this is just a paper, but in the book, we have an entire discussion with this. We go, but I'm not going to do it now. I'm just going to give you the one that has the following requisite. First, is plausible. And second, actually is a problem for space-time methodological emergence. I'm going to show you something that it's not. So here's one. If X is part of Y, and Y is exactly located at R, then X is weakly located at R. Now, so here's just to make you see, just to give you an argument for the claim I just made. Instead, if you had here, if X is part of Y and X is exactly located at R, then Y is weakly located at R. The principle would be natural as well, but then the space-time emergence will not provide a counterexample. So this is just to say that there are inequivalent ways, and it's not said that, you know, space-time emergence, but it's just one, not all of them. Now, in that thing, in that precise formulation, I mentioned two locative notions: the exact location of an object and the weak location of an object. The exact. So as of now, I'm going to give you just what we call informal glosses. These are not the technical definition. Okay, I'm going to take one as a primitive and give you technical definitions. This is just to make you see what the target notion is. So the exact location of an object is this shadow and substantively spaced on. It's just whatever. So if I do this, it's just the shape. It's just the shape. It's just the region that is shaped like this, or jazzy hands. Okay. Weak location is the locative relation that an object bears to every space-time region, which is not completely free. So, for example, I am clearly weakly located where I am exactly located. I'm also weakly located in this room, right? Because this room is not completely free of me. There's a part in this room which you go, you will find. I'm also weakly located where my heart is, right? Because you will find me there, like you can poke me. Now, if I were to actually stick my arm outside the window, I would still count as weakly located in this room. You can find this room. And I would count also as weakly located, right? In, I don't know, the outside, let's call it, okay? Because you can find me there. You can actually cut my finger there. Okay? So this is just to give you an informal grasp of the notions. Now, even with this just informal grasp, right, you can see that this is pretty natural. It just says that, you know, if I am exactly located here, then my parts are somehow here. The thought is that you don't get to do this thing. I'm here, but my parts are, I don't know, in Berlin. And you don't get to do that. If I'm here, my parts are somehow here. That's the thought that's trying to capture. Okay. Now, once you have that, you can simply, as I told you, right? It seems that in the theories of location literature, you have two options. And one seems to be pretty close to just denying regions are somewhere. Like at that stage, you might just turn the argument on its head. Because the thought here is that, right? So the thought here is that we are looking at people that already are committed to space-time methodological emergence, so you have to give up one of the two. And the thought is that it's pretty natural, and you cannot give up that, so really this is an argument against it. But of course, you can't deny this. At this point, as far as the logic of the location relation goes, it seems that there might be two options. As a matter of fact, I will construct for you in front of your eyes two theories of location, one of which denies that. But that's too quick. Why? Because this is just logic. You might think, okay, the logic of location, right, does not rule out the denial of regional sum. But logic, unfortunately, is not all that there is to the world, right? The logical structure in the world. Maybe the metaphysics rules out, or maybe your physics rules that out. And Byron himself has provided two arguments in favor of that. And I'm going to show you now, again, the same thing here. This is Byron, but given it's one of the co-authors, like he checked it. So my reconstruction is fair. And as a matter of fact, it started as a reply to this argument, just as a reply. Okay, so here there are two different arguments. The spatiotemporal, what do you call it? Spatiotemporal properties argument and the location of objects. The first one, it says, look, clearly spatiotemporal regions have spatiotemporal properties, but they will not have it unless they were located in space-time. Why this region is 2 meters from that region? So the region where Bruno is and the region where Jacopo is. Well, because they're both located in space-time, and then that's why they get to inherit, let's say, spatial. Same thing for objects. Okay. So we all agree, everyone in the debate agree that we are material objects are weakly located somewhere, at least weakly located somewhere. Exactly located is more of a controversy. But for microscopic objects, let's say that Jacopo is there. If Jacopo is there and the location of Jacopo were not there, then Jacopo would not count as located in space-time. That's exactly what Byron, by the way, says here. Suppose so something is in Sydney. If Sydney is not in space-time, then you don't count as in space-time, which is everyone agrees that. Okay, good. Now, what am I going to do? I'm going to do the following thing. I'm going to actually develop. I'm not going to do the entire thing, but we can chat. A formal theory of location, and then I'm going to give you two what they're called non-conservative coherent extensions of that. Okay. One of which actually has as a theorem that regions are known. Now, by the sheer existence of these coherent yet non-conservative extensions, just tells you that in biological law you don't get the argument you want. Now, the good thing is that this theory will help them also actually reply to these arguments as well, or at least that's what I think. And let's go. So I will not do it completely because So here's you take basically a few primitives. Oh yes. So I'm sorry that I didn't put the primitives because I was late. So this is the primitive that says x is part of y or x is part of z, and then there's going to be another primitive which is the following one, which is exact location. L is exactly located in y. Okay. So, for those of you who don't know mereology, these are just very trivial mereological notions. Overlap is sharing of parts. And this is read like Z is the fusion of the phi's, which means Z is the fusion of the things that satisfy the open formula phi. Okay. And it just says that every phi is part of the fusion, and every part of the fusion overlaps in this one phi. This is nothing unorthodox here. It's exactly what you expect. Is the so the fusion of the x's is the entity, the smallest, even the smallest is not a logical term, smallest entity that has all of them as parts. Is the counterpart of set reticule. In this context, we will see why it doesn't matter if you pick and choose one over the others, because in extension, I'm going to use an extension of language. So the other one, as I was telling you, is the notion of exact location. And we have a bunch of principles that we call it non-negotiable. By non-negotiable, we mean either you pick up one primitive, you define it, and then they're theorems, or you should just add them as axioms. Okay. So one, for example, has it that weak location is the weakest location. So everyone entails that, and so on and so forth. Here we're going to be, all that's going to matter is this one. So suppose you have a primitive predicate of being a space-time region, which you call R, then you force with an axiom that the second argument of any location relation, these are the ones that are defined, is a region. This is just to say that we are talking now about spatial area. This is going to matter. It's going to be crucial. Now, if you have that, here are standard definitions. It's not standard, but natural definitions. So X is weakly located in Y if it's exactly located in the region that overlaps Y. which is exactly what gets right, for example, the fact that I'm weakly located here and the fact that I'm weakly located both outside and here if I stick my hand outside. Entire location that says X is entirely located at Y if it is exactly located at a part of Y. So for example, I'm entirely located in this room. Why? Because I'm exactly located here, and here is a part of this room. Okay. Conversely, pervasive location says that X is pervasively located in Y if it is exactly located at an extension of Y. So for example, I count as pervasively located where my heart is. Why? Because I'm exactly located here, and here has the region of my heart as a part. Imagine pervasive location is filling the region. Intuitively, that's what it means. Okay. And now in elephant sublocation is just this. This is just the mechanical translation. It's nothing more than what you already saw. Okay. So now with that, I can define the notion of being a spatiotemporal entity. Spatiotemporal entity is anything that has a weak location in space time. So for example, Bruno here, that's spatiotemporal entity. The fusion of Bruno and the number 7 is a spatiotemporal entity. Okay. The number 7 itself is not. I mean, modulo very weird positions about sets. Okay. Now I am going to use an extensional mereology for space-time region. This is why, because when you do physics, you usually use set theory, so that's just a normal, just a natural assumption to make. What it means that for any plurality of region, there's going to be a unique fusion. So fusions are going to be unique. There's going to be only one thing, which is the smallest thing, because everything is parts. So now, if you do that, you can define this general fusion operator, which you see is just the notion of fusion with the yacht operator, which is the fusion of the. And now you can define space-time as the universal region, the fusion of all regions. This is going to matter. This definition is going to matter. Okay, good. Now, so this is the core theory. I didn't give you all the theory because I didn't tell you all the axioms. This is the core theory. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build two non-conservative extensions of that. And how am I building that? I'm just going to take what Achilles said, and just plug in one axiom that straightforwardly, just translates that and see what I can do. So the first one is that, of course, regions are located, if they're located at themselves, right? Okay, so here's the formulation. If X is a region, so sometimes it's called reflexivity for region. Stupid. Now, somewhere, which is the formal counterpart of regions are somewhere, just says that if R is a region, then it has a weak location. Equivalently, regions are spatial entities. Regions of space-time are themselves spatial entities in this technical sense. Okay? Because there are different senses in which something can be a spatial entity. In this technical sense, as a matter of fact, you can prove that in the presence of these axioms, these two things are equivalent. And this follows as a theory. So if you have these, so the conservative extension, the non-conservative extensions, it's not conservative because you can derive this from the old theory. But with that, you can just derive all this as a theory. Good. So the other ones is regions. Achille put it, I think it's a beautiful way in which Achille put it, regions do not have locations, they are locations. Okay. So now I'm just going to put it that if R is a region, there is no exact location of the region. In this particular theory, then nowhere follows. This implication actually works only for this particular theory I'm giving you. Otherwise, you should add this as an axiom as well. But in this particular theory, this is a theorem as well. It says that they don't have even weak location, therefore regions are not spatial entities. Of course, that doesn't mean, so you might say, oh, that's just crazy. Clearly, regions of space-time are spatial. That just means that the technical notion, right? Of course, it's still parts of space. So if you think that there's another notion of being spatial entity, just being part of space-time, in this sense, for example, Bruno is a spatial entity in this sense, but not in the other, because it's not, I mean, all the certain assumptions, it's not part of space. And now, of course, you can prove that these are just equivalent. Okay, so once again, the sheer existence of that says, given that this is just incompatible with somewhere, it just says, look, I can have a formal theory of location such that it just denies regions are somewhere, and nothing in the logic will tell me anything different. and nothing back here. Okay. But as we saw, it's not just a matter of logic, right? So now I'm going to argue that I'm going to undermine both the arguments, both the metaphysical argument and also the logical ones. Now I'm going to take the location of objects first. Remember, it says somewhere, which is just the technical counterpart of regions of somewhere, is required for objects to be located in space-time. Now there are only two plausible readings, which is, so this is a primitive predicate for X as an object. There are only two plausible readings it's either weakly located in space-time or entirely. Right? The other two that we saw, they're not, they're not plausible, right? Meaning for certain, at least for certain objects, right? For me, it's not plausible that I'm purposely doing it in space-time because I'm big, but I'm not that big. And exactly the same. So the good thing is that, so I'm going to give an informal argument, but the technical argument is that these are theorems of the core theory of rotation. You don't need the extensions to prove them. Why that's an important technical result? It's important because it tells you that you don't need somewhere. So here's a sketch of the argument. Objects are spatiotemporal entities, everyone agrees. Therefore, they have a weak location. Okay. Therefore, they have an exact location. Unfortunately, that's the part of this theory if you want to have it for everything. Therefore, they have an exact location. If they have an exact location, and they have an entire location, and given that, because every exact location you will see, there's an axiom that says every entire location, for example, is an exact location. Every exact location is an entire location. And then entire location and weak location, you can prove that are monotonic. That is, if you are weakly located in a region, and that region is part of a bigger one, then you also weakly located there, and also entirely located there, which makes sense, right? So I'm entirely located in this room, therefore I'm entirely located in Lisbon, therefore I'm entirely located in Portugal, and so on. So you just need that, and space-time is just a fusion. The maximal region, therefore, is an extension of every other region. That's all you need to run the argument. And once again, the technical point is that nowhere here you appeal to somewhere. As a matter of fact, you can prove it in the whole theory. You don't need any extension to do that. Okay. So the thought here is that all that you need to actually say that Bruno is in space-time, it's not that his region is located in space-time, but that his region is meteorologically related to space. It is a part of space-time. You remember what Byron said, like, I think that, I don't know, Susan is in Sydney, and Susan is also in space-time because Sydney is part, Sydney, I mean, the region of Sydney, what's in this case, of this part of space-time. The argument generalizes, like, take any what I call elemental relation that is X is an element of Y, which might be subsethood, which might be the plural logical predicate being one of them. Parthood, someone thinks inclusion is different than, for example, parthood, and so on and so forth. You can define all the notions here, just put entire location in the terms of elementhood, okay? And you can see that you will run the proof, and you will see that all you need is that the regions stand in the element, being an element of the space-time. It doesn't need to be a location of that notion. As a matter of fact, all you need, if you look at the proof, is that the resolution is transitive. That's all the technical field that's required. It just boils down to transitivity of element proof. Okay, good. This also responds, I think, to the space-time property. Why? Because you can just say now, well, they acquire the space-time property that they have, not just by being located in space-time, or being part of space-time, or being elements of space-time. Which you think is what we do in math, right? We use set theory, and then we define logical space on a set, we define a metrical space on a set, a measurable space on a set, and we never use notation. Okay, so as I think that at this point in the dialectic of the argument, you can just say that there is at least a dark passage that leads you to nowhere. Okay. Why am I using these words? Because these are the words of Hemingway. Of course, I'm going to do. So, right, and it says, yeah, nowhere is the key. Right? There's a dark passage which leads to nowhere, then again to nowhere, once again to nowhere, and always and forever to nowhere. So at this point, you can just say, I'm just gonna say that regions of space-time are nowhere, and I'm done. Now, second, but this thing conflicts with a number of views in the metaphysics of objects. So a number of views in the metaphysics of objects cannot take this. These views are called supersubstantivalisms, because this is a very wide variety of views on which there are views about the relation between objects and space-time. And there are different relations, different views depending on which relation you think. It's the relation model, once again, the relation between space-time and matter. Arguably, historically, what we had was just identity. Right? Jacopo is just a region of space. So it was probably had by Descartes, clearly more, for example, and it has defenders nowadays, Jonathan Schaffer being arguably the most famous one, but Lewis gets very close to it and Quine gets very close to it as well. Now, within this formal framework, you can distinguish different versions of that, and depending on background assumptions, there might not be equivalent. Even these, for example, right? So you see the odd ones, 1 and 3, you might think that they're equivalent only if you think that spatiotemporal entities and objects are one and the same entity, right? That every spatiotemporal entity is an object. But if you're not, if you think events are spatiotemporal entities, become clearly they're not weakly against space-time, but they're not objects. This is going to take these, but the comments will not hold. Okay. So it doesn't matter for our purposes. Probably you are familiar with this one, because this one is in this setting. This just says that Bruno is identical to its exact location. That's the most familiar one. It doesn't just say, as the first one, that it's identical with some region. It only picks up one region in particular, its exact location. Okay, good. So why is this important? Because now, if you just give me that there is at least an object, I can derive as a theory what we call weak somewhere. That there is at least a region that is weakly located. Okay. So this is not somewhere, right? It's weaker, right? Because somewhere it says every region actually is exactly located at itself. This is way weaker. But the problem is that, of course, so here's the argument, right? But now, the argument is stupid, meaning the following. Like now you just need to pick, so there exists just one, at least one object. Suppose it's the apple. I just pick that object, right? It is weakly located. Why? Because that's the definition of being a spatiotemporal entity, and objects are spatiotemporal entities. Therefore, it has a weak location. But of course, we just said that it's identical for region, so that region is going to be weakly located. That's the point. And why is this important? Because of course, you don't need the full strength of regions or somewhere to run the argument from intimacy. You just need this. The only problem is that you have to pick one region, one specific region. But the argument is basically the same. This is just repeating me, so I'm not going to go. It's simply the same argument. You just need to look at, pick the argument. You pick the argument and then you run the argument with the argument. Okay, good. Now, so here's a natural reaction. Well, this is a very controversial piece, right? Why? Because it says that when I am in love with Jared Leto or Natalie Portman, what really happens is that space-time region is in love with another space-time region. And that's just weird to say. And in particular, philosophically, it clashes with, for example, one particular metaphysics of persistence, which is three-dimensionalism. At least unless you do something. Now, there are 4 three-dimensionalists that come up with different supersubstantivalist views, which do not use identity, but use constitution. Okay? So that's the relation, let's say, that typically holds between the statue and the claim. Just. Now, there are 2 ways you can go. You can actually define constitution in mereological terms. It's mereological coincidence, like having the same proper parts. Okay. And you give up an extension of mereology, so it's not identity, or you can just take it as a primitive. So Claudio Calosi is a very beautiful paper about this. Now, the point is that this will not get you very far because we think that a counterpart of inheritance also works for things that are related by the constitutional relation. At least to say, so taking the statue and the clay, right? Of course, the statue is where the clay is. It's not that you get the lump of clay here and the statue gets to be outside. So that move by itself will not get you. Now, in recent literature, especially in the literature of philosophy of physics, now there's a new view which is called priority supersubstantialism. It just says that space-time regions are prior to material objects. And Dennis Lem could have argued that this is the right lesson to draw, for example, from general relativity. It's called the metaphysics of supersubstantivalism. Now, there's a discussion about which relation tracks the melodical, the being prior of relation, but so I'm going to go be generous here and say, suppose there is a determination relation, and the only thing that I know about this, it's just that tracks relative fundamental. That is to say that it obeys the following condition. Right? If X is determined by Y, if X determines Y, then X is prior to Y. So the thought is that, once again, I'm going to beat these two all over. So if you think that the organs of groups now determines group, then you have to say that the organs are prior to. And if you think that the atoms determines the organs, then you're going to say that the atoms determines are prior to the organs. And of course, if you think it's translate, it follows that the atoms are prior to group. That's what he just said. Now the question is there an example of the relation such that it captures the core of this supersubstantivalism, and entities that are not derelated do not obey the counterpart of inheritance? And I'm going to leave it as an open question. Why? Because I thought that this had the best shot. Because I think I could think of a determination relation, a paradigmatic determination relation, that actually it's unclear to me that it obeys inheritance. And I was thinking about grounding. No? Because I thought, wait, maybe the fact that Elizabeth died grounds the fact that, Charles became king. Clearly, the location of these two facts might not be. Now, I've been told by Sam Barron that in the book, Timelessness, which just came out from Oxford University Press, in fact, they argue that actually grounded related entities do obey inheritance. So I'm guessing that that's a methodological thing. You should read the things about that your co-authors write. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So, but no, I just want to mention that there are some people that think that actually, at least for some paradigmatic derelation, inheritance will actually hold for derelated entities. So therefore, this will not even get you out of, in this case, this will not get you out of the argument. Now, and it's just important to note that, because at a certain point, that's the move that is most being advocated in the literature that says, well, okay, fine, we just gotta reject inheritance. The thought is that there are some views that we explore that cannot do that. And the most straightforward case is the identity supersubstantivalism. So this is best appreciated as follows. So Matt Leonard has recently proposed that any supersubstantivalist will be better off endorsing what he calls the identity theory of location. Now, this is just, Matt uses higher order identifications for different reasons. The main reason is that you might think that this is just supersubstantivalism too. The thought is that it has different modal forms. The first one is just purely about conditional. This has modal forms. But it just says, look, exact location for object is identity. It just says that. Okay. And the identity theory of location in these guys, it's already in the original paper by Josh. Okay. Why do I'm claiming that you cannot reject inheritance? Here's the argument. If you give me this, I can prove. Actually, this is one of the cases in which in the paper you say these proofs are trivial, so I left to the reader. So I'm not sure because I really didn't do that. But my guess is that they're really just checking definitions. So if exact location is identity, then weak location is overlap, entire location is partout, and pervasive location is extension. That is the comments of partout. As you can see here, not to use the primitives, I just switched the argument basis. Okay. Why is that? Because now if you have these and these, and you plug in the inheritance, you will see that inheritance boils down to the fact that if X is part of Y, X overlaps Y. Which is a trivial immunological difference, meaning I think that all you need to prove that, once again, I didn't do it, but I think that all you need to prove is just the flexibility of part two, I guess. So it's very weak. Okay. So these people cannot even reject it. Okay. So here's what you can do. Well, I don't care what these people in the philosophy of physics have suggested. I'm just going to give up supersubstantivalism. It was a metaphysically controversial thesis in the first place. Okay, so you can surely do that. Now the problem is that now, remember where we started. We started like this, right? We started like, okay, in this theory of physics, you're going to have space. So it needs to emerge because otherwise some people, like Timon, for example, thinks that they're empirically created. Okay. Now, it's not only that they don't have space, they don't even materially physics. Now, if you're a supersubstantivalist, once you actually have space-time, then your supersubstantivalist will take care of the relation between space-time and matter. So you have not to do the same thing over. Once you get the emergence of space-time, your relation of supersubstantivalist will do the job. But here, you're just telling me at this stage of the election that you're going to reject supersubstantivalist. Therefore, you need to do it again. Like, it's not just that, you know, you look at causal theory, you look at quantum gravity, you don't find space-time, you need to find chairs. Right? So now how? Of course, the thought is that now you can just use instead of spatiotemporal, instead of regions of somewhere, you just can say spatiotemporal location, regions of. Yes, spatiotemporal entities, spatiotemporal entities. Where I actually put spatiotemporal entity rather than object because I'm not sure that in this context people will have like would want to be constrained of the fact that all matter comes in the form of object. Maybe matter fields are not objects like chairs, but clearly they wouldn't want to, account for them. Okay, that's once again, this is another instance of the argument for intimacy, and the argument is just the same. I just replaced R and B, so I'm not going to go over it again. Okay. Why am I for trouble? Okay, sure. Okay. So here's the dilemma, right? Either supersubstantialism is true or it's false. If it's true, it seems that not the original argument goes through, but some variant of it, the one with weak somewhere rather than regions or somewhere. If it is false, however, then one is free to reject regions or somewhere and even weak somewhere. But then one cannot account for the emergence of matter via the emergence of space-time. You have to do it separately, that's the thought. They might be related, but you have to do it. And it seems that the emergence of matter faces a second iteration of the argument from intimacy, which is the one we already saw. So now what? Once again, you're always free to reject elements. Now, we were chatting last Friday with this guy. The third side that thinks that, for example, you cannot reject it because he thinks that this is analytic of the notion of part. He thinks that to give a theory of part, you don't have to give just a theory about parts, but also how parts interact with other notions, location being one of those. And this is just too central to give up. Okay. So the thought is there a way, faced with these arguments, to still actually maintain that? And I think there is one. There is one which is metaphysically loaded, which I'm not presenting. There's one which I think it's not metaphysically loaded, which I'm going to discuss with you because I think this one actually is broader in the sense that I think it can be applied to different regions for different philosophy of physics. Okay. So the first step is realize that here, right, we use location in a very narrow sense, spatiotemporal location. As a matter of fact, the only axiom that we discussed a little bit, second argument place, is exactly, let's say, one way of spelling it out. The second argument place of the location relation is always a region. Okay. But of course, location is used in a variety of different ways. Location in similarity space, location in phase space, location in logical space, location in possibility space, location within a structure, and so on and so forth. This at least, but that's how we use location. I'm not saying that there's an argument, and yet I'm not saying anything metaphysical about that, but we use location in this. Like, for example, if you read the Tractatus, right? Wittgenstein uses exactly that word. It says that proposition is a place in logical space. The same if you read in a structuralist philosophy of mathematics, Shapiro famously said, 2 is just a place in the natural number structure. Peter Simons argues that location is indeed formal in the original sense of Husserl. Like it doesn't know any restriction whatsoever, it's domain independent. And his argument, I'm not going to go over it, but it's the font. It's just that take any structure and he takes Hamlet, which is without going to take hand game. Take hand game, and you have 4 characters. You will have relations between the characters. Now just delete the names of. So the relation, one relation is or functions or propositional functions. Like it's a feeder of like so. Ham like is feeded by Clove. Clove feeds Ham and feeds Nell and feeds Nell. Okay. Now take off the names and replace it with variables, and then take off the propositional variables and just replace it with function. And you will have that there's a feeder position. Okay. And it becomes that log actually occupies the feeder position. Not only you actually have furthermore that, for example, I don't know, remember the guy Blinn, I think. So it was the first actor that played Claude, so he's located in the character Claude. Okay. But once again, we don't have to go this far. I tend to think that there's some grain of truth. Location is far more general than we think. So if you read, for example, Aristotle, I think that Aristotle never says that properties are in space-time. They are in the objects that exemplify, which is a completely different claim. I think, for example, that difference, when you in the book we go over it, I think it matters, as a matter of fact. So we don't have to go, an unrestricted, unbridled pluralism here, but I'm just, so for the purpose of this paper, which is the one we're going in the book, like way more pluralistic. You're just going to say, suppose there's a location in space-time and there's a location not in space-time. And given that you're not familiar with this, I'm going to say a few words on this. Now, I don't have an entire theory of that here, but I'm going to say, surely it cannot obey the original second argument space-time, but it should obey a counterpart of it. Suppose that you have a more general predicate R star that says that the region is just a place in this field. So in the book, we call it field of regions and domain of occupants. That's just a logical thing. So suppose you say that the second argument is going to be this region. Now you might think that so now here's a thought that you might have. The thought that you might have is that every spatiotemporal entity is located this way, but the convex does not move. So every spatiotemporal entity is also located in this sense, but it's not true that everything that is located in this sense is also located in space. Now there are different ways formally of doing that. That's going to differ. That's just the idiosyncrasy here. Suppose I define the notion of being an occupant of a field of regions such that it's just that you have a weak location in that field of regions. So we are occupants of space-time. For example, if you think that we also are located in worlds, we're also occupant of this world, okay, and so on and so forth. Maybe we're occupant in the plurality of philosophers in this world, and so on and so forth. And now you can define spatiotemporal occupant. Okay, so you might think that every spatiotemporal occupant is an occupant, of course, but not that every occupant is a spatiotemporal occupant. Okay, so you might want to define that. Now, here's the controversial one. Suppose you look at the physics, and the physics will give you a fields of a structure that you call a fields of location, and you say that everything is located there. Everything is an occupant in the stacking. Now, I tend to think that this is very complicated. We disagree, for example, me and my co-authors. I think the same Byron thinks this should be fine. I tend to think it might be possible. Now, so I'm going to give you my version of the story. But suppose you put that here. Now, of course, the first thing that you can do is that you say, well, the inheritance of location is just ambiguous between two meanings. It's either inheritance of space-time location or inheritance of non-space-time location. And the problem here is that all the examples we have given violate this, but we don't violate that. Right? Now, so yeah, this is just what I said. Not only, you might think the following thing, that it's an normal thought to have, but I think it's not completely right. You might think, look, and it gets even better. If you buy into the occupation principle, you don't get to have violations of this guy, of inheritance and esteem. Why? Why? Because if you look at the violations were given by the fact that there was something which was in a particular space, in this case space-time, in a particular field of region, but its parts were not. But the occupation will rule this case out. Okay. So you might think, well, I'm going to buy into the occupation principle just because it will give me everything that I want. Yeah, it's controversial, but it will give me everything that I want. I think it's less controversial not to deny evidence. Now, unfortunately, I think that's quite true. Meaning the following thing. Occupation by itself does not entail, unfortunately, evidence. There could be violations. How? There could be a sense, suppose that was that I'll take Bruno again and suppose that the non-spatial temporal thing, I don't know what causal set. In my view would be that Bruno is only in one causal set, but it's parts of it. Now, granted, this is not the same violation that we started with. The first violation we started with is some parts and whole do not share the same arena, let's say. Here they do, the occupation principle forces that. But it doesn't force that methodologically related in the right way as inheritance demands. That's the point. Okay. Of course, the thought is that now the violations are not questions of existence of mutation, which is exactly what the first violation is. It's a question about the methodological relation. Now, so you might think, okay, that's good, it's kind of good enough. Now, I tend to think the following. Now, if you went so far as buying the occupation rules, I think the additivity principle is less controversial, so you should buy it. And the additivity principle just says before, so this just it's an abbreviation for X is the sum of x1, x2, x2, xn. Same for regions. This is just a long conjunction that says x1 is exactly located at R1 and x2 is exactly located at R2 and so on and so forth. So this principle just said, where is this shared? Well, take the sum, look at its parts, take the sum of the regions of the exact relation of the parts, and then you get the exact relations of each. That's what it says. Now, I think that this is modulo things about multiplication that we're not going to go into, but we can if you want, guys. I think once you bought into the occupation, I think it's less controversial. So, and why am I saying that? Because now the occupation and additivity do just entail inheritance. You will not get violations of inheritance. Just even the inheritance as we started. But of course, so here's two problems. So I really think, I really think it's a problem. Meaning, like, I tend to think that, and I will show you, hopefully, if I try to tell you why. I think that the occupation principle is very strong. I'm unclear that I don't know how to argue in favor. I don't know how to argue against, but I don't even know how to argue in favor. And it seems to me that there are natural positions that will actually violate that. So this is a problem, right? Because you say, well, I mean, it's a matter of cost, right? Cost benefits, right? You might think, well, I'm going to buy if it saves inheritance. But of course, the other problem is that you might think, well, inheritance of location ST, like the space, I'm still violating. And that's what matters to me. I don't know why. Because you are fixated that that's the one that matters to you. Okay, so now I am going to give you what I think is the best solution. And it's also because I think, the most metaphysically lightweight. You don't need occupation principle, for example. And I think it's far general. And I'll tell you why, for example, gets you out of a problem that has been a problem in the literature with functional realism. Unfortunately, the problem I raised it, so it seems like I'm refuting myself. I'm kind of thinking, right, a bit against myself, but just kind of against myself. So here's the one. So look, so here's the story, how I got to it. This is just how we got to the story. I thought, okay, inheritance principle clearly sounds super close. But why? Well, because we never thought, right, about exotic cases in which parts and wholes do not share the same arena in the first. But inheritance is so natural because we don't think, even that Bruno is in space, you don't get to have the liver here and the thing going away. But if you have these metaphysical theories that tells you, like bundle theories of Platonic universals, right, that do not have locations, but they make up Bruno is in space. Why would you think that? So the thought is that, wait a minute, maybe the inheritance principles are in fact very natural, but just for things that we know at the beginning share the same space. They're weakly located at the same space. So if you share the arena, then yes, the inheritance principle is just very natural. So the thought is that there are a restricted version of the inheritance principles, such that they restrict to parts and wholes that live in the same space. And now here you can do it in a couple of ways. You can restrict quantifiers, for example. And then here I've done all this machinery, right? The most straightforward and stupid way of saying is just add conjuncts to the antecedent. Now, this is just inheritance. This is just invariant. And here I say, look, but on condition, and you can even write it as a condition, right? You can write that as a condition, and then you, let's say, I'm using terminology, the deduction here, and we'll do the job for you, right? So it tells you, provided that Bruno and its parts are in the same space, then they obey inheritance. Okay. Now, in these cases, you can see, right, that every case I presented does not violate any of these cases, because they will come out as trivially true. As a matter of fact, every time you have parts and wholes, you have a metaphysical theory that tells you that parts and wholes actually live in different spaces. Okay, you can get violations of these guys. So the thought here is that first, you need to argue. I didn't in the paper, and I will not do now. But so if I wanted to actually put forward this is a fully fledged reply, I would do that. First, I would argue that whatever plausibility the inheritance principle would have, stand or falls with the restricted versions. And then I just show this I did, and I just show that the restricted versions are never violated. The only thing you get violations of are the unrestricted ones, but you should claim that the unrestricted ones are not the ones that are plausible. Okay. Now, I think that this is important even in cases, as a matter of fact, this is clearly, as you can see, this is basically a talk of philosophical logic. I get almost no physics. But I've done a case in physics in which, even though I know a little bit more about physics there, actually, it fits this pattern. So probably you know that Aris-Sanin has the following view. The view is that there is only one fundamental thing, which is the wave function, and the wave function is a field in configuration space. As a matter of fact, the field is located, okay, where it is on the space where it is defined, so configuration space. Okay. Configuration space is not three-dimensional space. Now she adds another very controversial bit. So she says that you guys and I and particles are parts of the wave function. So it's crucial for one thing that she wants to do in metaphysics. Not every wave function realist that report this. This is just very peculiar to her. But then I thought, and then she said, well, there's written not nowhere in the laws of mereology that needs to share space, and which I think she's completely right. But the point is that this is not a mereological principle. This is a principle of formativity of location. It uses mereology, but it's not mereology. And the principle she is violating is clearly inheritance, or the counterpart. Okay. So the thought is that, well, yes, it's problematic because you are telling me that the parts of one thing that here in Lisbon, by the things of which they are parts, right? It's not even to be found in this, which is very controversial. Now, and unfortunately, it's me that brings it that I really print. Now I think working on the book that she can pull the same movement. She has two moves to make. The first one is to accept that the wave function field is really located here. She has, and I'll show you in the paper, like she has the formal resources. I mean, she's not into formal work, but she has the formal resources to say the wave function field is purposely located in some regions and weakly located in space, but it's not entirely located here. Therefore, it's not exactly located here. She can go that route, okay? Which I think, so talking to her, I think she's partial to it. And she said, yeah, I should say that, right? I mean, Bruno is made of wave function stuff, so of course there is a sense of that wave function stuff. But if you don't want to do it, if you want to say, no, wait a minute, fundamental entity is just entirely located in configuration space. And as three-dimensional objects, suppose there is a fusion of as three-dimensional objects. Now that guy is entirely located in three-dimensional space, okay, but it's still part of the wave function. Then you can do the restricted thing. Okay. Why? Because of course now the way in this case the wave function field is not going to be a spatiotemporal entity, and therefore this guy is not violated. And if she can argue that the restricted versions are the one that are plausible, she can reply to that in this way. So once again, this is just to show that I think this narrative, let's say, fits different cases in philosophy of physics. And that's basically it. I just want, so the only thing you have to buy, unfortunately, that's true. I mean, probably there are other things. In the book, I'm committed to it in different ways, that there are different places. Space-time places are just one kind of place. Okay. there are other places. And I'm saying that because then I'm going to leave you with little Gidding, which is the last of the fourth quarter, right? And when TSL has exactly this thought that there are other places, and which are the world's ends, and you will see this is a very mystical place. As a matter of fact, if you read the poem, this is the place in which basically there's no time, in which we only say apparently. So somehow we have to go there. But this is the place where he is, the church where he is, which is little Gidding here. It's just nearest in space and time. That's in space and time, but that doesn't mean that space and time exhaust all the places that there are. And that's basically it. Yeah, that's basically it.